All right. So
Be nice or leave. Thank you. I
know,
like that.
I was looking at that.
I would like
Be
to
nice or
have
leave.
that.
Thank you.
right.
Oh, that's great.
So we're on, right?
We're on.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm here with Dr. Sigrid Glynn and Dr. Janet Ellis to talk about how the Behavior Analysis Department at University of North Texas came to be. Dr. Glynn, who is involved in making behavior analysis part of the university?
Well, Don Whaley was the first person who brought behavior analysis to University of North Texas, and he came as an assistant professor in 1969. That was the year that I started graduate school at the University of North Texas, and Janet was, I believe, in graduate school that year as well, in the master's degree program in psychology.
And how did behavior analysis courses come to be added to the university catalog?
Oh, it took a long time from when Don Whaley first came in 69, then left the psych department in 74, and then it was 1982 before we had any courses at all in behavior analysis. And they came to be started because we had a dean named Bill Luker who decided he wanted the School of Community Service to increase its academic presence on a campus. And so he came to the Center for Behavioral Studies, where Don Whaley was the executive director, and I was functioning as de facto the clinical director of the program. And so I asked Don Whaley if, when Dean Luker came, if other people could be present in the meeting about the Center for Behavioral Studies. He was a new dean. And so Janet and I and Judy Stowe and Susan Miller and Shirley White and Don Whaley met with Dean Luker and asked if we might have some courses in behavior analysis, and lo and behold, he thought that was a great idea. So we were shocked because for many years Don Whaley was absolutely convinced that we couldn't have any courses, and I think the only reason we could now was because of Bill Luker.
Janet, we know that your involvement with the Texas Department of Corrections helped to establish behavior analysis at UNT. Can you tell us how you got involved there and how that involvement helped to establish behavior analysis in the department?
I can tell you how I got involved, but the reason I got involved was because there was no budget for anyone but Sigrid at that time, right? And I wanted very much to work there because we've been colleagues since 1972. And there was no salary. I could work. They would be delighted to have me, but they couldn't afford to pay me. There was only going to be one person. And so I was very distressed and very disturbed, and I began reading the newspaper. I was thinking, if I've got to leave, I'm going to find a good job. And all I saw were stories about how terrible the prisoners were being treated and how bad Texas was treating prisoners. And so I talked to my husband and I said, if I can get into the prison, he said, would they promise to keep you? And I said, no, probably not, because they'd get to know me. And so he said, what do you have in mind? And so I told him, and he said, okay, because we still had two children at home. Wasn't it two?
Mm-hmm.
And Noah and Josh. And so I kept those articles out of the paper. And I called because they had a want ad in the Dallas Morning News, and we got that from my folks. And I called the prison, and Dr. Walter Quijano talked to me, and I told him, I said, what are you interested in terms of a prison psychologist? And he gave me the same old line about psychologists. And I said, oh yes, I can do that. Oh yes, I can do that. Oh yes, I can be happy to. I said, however, what about if along with psychology, you had someone who could train guards to treat inmates differently and train your social workers? He said, well, we don't have that. I said, well, you would if you hired me. And he said, well, I don't believe we have an opening for what you're talking about, because I wasn't going down as a prison psychologist. So every time in the newspaper, fortunately, I mean, it was just a stroke of luck, they ran stories every single week of prison breaks, fires the inmates had set, not necessarily in the prison where I went to work, but all over the system. And every time I read one of those stories, I called Walter Quijano, or I wrote him, and I said, if you had had a behavior analyst, here's how I would have handled that. And it wouldn't have come to setting fire to cells and trying to kill people, trying to kill guards. And I did that from, I guess, the start of the fall until around, when did we have him at Texaba?
I don't remember. Oh, probably February.
Okay, then it was from December through the summer, and then the following February, wasn't it?
I think so, but
Anyway, it was in, I said, he said, you can come down. I'll talk to you about this. Well, I didn't want a job as a prison psychologist, and I couldn't figure a way to get out of that because everything I'd written was behavioral as to the way a behavior analyst would handle a situation like that. And so Sigrid said, I have an idea. Let's invite him to be our principal speaker at Texaba. And that's what we did. Yes, that's what you did. That was in February.
I thought you were already consulting down there by then.
No, I did not. It wasn't until the following, you called me to tell me in the summer that I had the job.
Okay, but my recollection is you got the job directly. I had nothing to do with your getting the job. So.
No, you may not have had nothing to do with it, but you arranged the salary for me, and Walter called you because you were the head of the department. I never got a direct phone call from him. You called and told me.
I know what it was. We wrote a proposal. We wrote a proposal.
Okay.
Yes, and that's why they.
Oh, of course.
From
I
North
remember
Texas.
that.
We wrote a proposal from North Texas to them, and they
Okay.
were going to hire you to work as sort of an employee of North Texas, and they did.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I knew that she did most of it. I got him interested, and then she finished it off.
And she did all the work.
So,
Yeah, and I did all the
So
work,
you
but
know-
I got paid for it.
Tell me a little bit about your involvement with getting students involved there, training of students.
Well, first, I ought to tell you a little bit about what we did before, because we wouldn't have needed students if I hadn't done if someone hadn't done this. I went down there, and these men were truly not vicious. They were truly not retarded. It was called the Mentally Retarded Offender Program, MROP. These men were not retarded, not at all. Most of them were Hispanic or black people who had not been to school. They couldn't read or write English, or read or write. And so I realized these men were not retarded. They just had never had any education. And so I set up the case managers to be teachers, and Dr. Quijano came to me and he said, you know, I can't keep you on here, can't really hire you unless we have some really excellent results, because we don't need any more people on F-Wing. The men are all single-celled and locked up all day long. So, you know, what's to need somebody for, except case managers who wrote their families and that kind of thing. So I talked to the case managers and I said, would you all be willing? There's the head of the prison system, the whole prison system is coming here in 2 weeks. Would you all be willing to start tutoring to these inmates with a guard in the room, so that we could maybe point out some of the things we're doing instead of just we're still planning it? And they said yes, they would be delighted. And so the day came for the head, and all of these women had classes for the inmates. It was one-on-one with a guard there, and they were teaching the alphabet and spelling, and ultimately they were going to teach reading. And I had been down there from August until December, just observing and making notes and deciding who I would like to have for guards, because many of the guards brutalized the inmates. And so the head of the prison came. I never met him. He came. I was too nervous. I couldn't even go to the meeting. I figured I would just be a nervous wreck. And Walter said, you come. So I sat in the very back of the room, and I said, ask the social workers what they've been doing, Walter. So that's what the program was. Well, the first one got up, and started talking, and then started crying about how much it meant to her, and how much is the first job she ever had that meant something, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth, and by the end of it, I was back there, you could hear me, from the back of the room. I lost it. I'm losing it now. I mean, it was beautiful. And so when it was over, I scooted out the back door because I said, oh God, that isn't what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear, that they hadn't had any more fires, or they hadn't, and I was afraid, I was worried about how I was going to tell them, thank you so much, but this isn't going to work, bye. And Walter came out with a smile. He's about this tall, and the smile was about this long. And he said, well, Dr. Ellis, we've got it. And I said, what do you mean, wee pale face? And he said, we've got it. You've got your program. And I started crying. And he said, no, you've got a program. They loved it. And and by that time I had stuff running out of my nose, my eyes. And I said, we got to call Sarah and tell her. And didn't he call it? He must have called you, because I was so emotional about it, I couldn't, And the guards were sitting there, I'm not working at any of this pussy job for inmates, for prisoners. And I thought, oh, I picked the wrong guards. Well, the women went on training. I got to go down. That was in February, and didn't I start when?
Pretty soon after that.
No, that was February. Whenever it was, I started soon after that. And I got all kinds of veiled threats. I was taking Weight Watcher data at that time, and one of the sergeants of all the guards in the prison system came up to me one day in the hall and said, Miss Ellis, you sure would make a good prison. Sure would make a good hostage. And I was terrified. And I didn't know what to do, so I said, oh, and I walked away, and I thought, God, what am I going to do? I'm scared to death. And then I pulled out my Weight Watcher thing, and I realized, I walked back over to him and I said, excuse me, his name's this big across his breast, excuse me, sir, is that Sergeant Alexander? And I said, is that your name? And he said, listen, I was only kidding. There's nothing going to happen to you. You're not going to get hurt in prison. And I realized these guys are they're big bluffers, because the inmates, they're taunting and insulting are behind bars. And when they come out to walk out of the cells, let's say this is the hallway. All of us were on this side, and the inmates had to walk single file wherever they were going. Single file in a strip of white paint no bigger than this that ran the length of the hallway and every one of the hallways in the prison.
As a doc, tell them about the students who did the reading program.
Oh, okay. Well, I brought a student down with me because I was there from Wednesday through Friday, but all day, and I was there for all 3 shifts. And then I just was getting worn out, and I was driving back, and I had 2 kids at home. And so Manish Vaidya was one of our undergraduates, Dr. Vaidya, who then became a master's student, and I invited him to come and share the load with me, and he agreed to it. And so he set up the classes for the reading, and but they wouldn't. I had to be there to say, it's fine, let him do it. He can do that. And I decided, after meeting all of the guards that were on this, what they called F wing, I decided I couldn't work with any of those men, all of them. They hated the inmates, and they taunted them, and it was a very unpleasant place. And so I went to the prison psychologist then, and Dr. Quijano, and I said, I need to pick my own guards. And he said, well, do you have any choice? I said, well, I'd like to pick from among the guards that we have on F wing. I want to pick the men I want to work. And so word got out that I was picking men to work with me and the students, or the case managers. And of course the word went out, that's pussy work. Now that was the lowest insult you could make. That's pussy work in the prison. And I was really hurt. And I was staying at a motel in Palestine. And I had out of a corps of almost, I think, 15 or 20 men, two had said they would do it. and I found out they were being taunted and all that by the other guards and by the head of the guards, the sergeant. And so I thought, well, this isn't going to work. And then I thought, but there's two guys I really want. So I went and asked them, but I made the mistake of asking them. We had two that agreed to work, and they were older gentlemen. They were the kindest, nicest guys in the world, and they really cared about how the inmates were treated. Then there were two other young ones who were strong, big, tall guys, and they didn't say anything. They hadn't said anything. They hadn't said they wouldn't. They hadn't said they would. And so I went up to both of them, and I said, guys, I would really like to have you, and I would like it very much if you would work with us, with the rest of us. I wouldn't work in that pussy outfit. I got this stuff. And I said, okay. And I went to my motel room and I started crying. I mean, I was just worn out. I couldn't see any, I was up against a wall. My phone rang. The first time it rang, it was one of the young men, and he said, listen, Dr. Ellis, when you come in tomorrow morning, you point your finger at me and you say, you don't have a choice, pal, because I've talked to Walter Quijano and you're coming with me. And I said, so I practiced a while in the motel, and he said, and I think you're going to get another phone call. Sure enough, I did. I can't remember his name. He was a gray-haired gentleman. Both of them said, we couldn't speak up in front of all the others and say we wanted to work with you, that we believed in what you wanted to do. But if you make us come, then we can come. And by the time that I left the prison, we had so many guards working in that program that the warden then decided that he would take these men and put them on all, because F-wing was getting, word was getting all over the area there that we were really doing a good job. The guards were marvelous. Everybody was happy. And so the prison psychologist, what was his name?
Walter Keanu?
No, the guy that tried to
Doug somebody.
threatened to fire us. Okay, whoever he was. He had talked to the warden and suggested the way to break us up was to take these men off of F-wing and put them all on different wings throughout the prison. Then we wouldn't have anybody but a few people who could work with the inmates. And so I was just really depressed. I didn't know what to do. And Manish came back. Manish would go down every Friday. He came down. Anyway, he stayed Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then he came back with me. He came back and he said, Doc, I've got the best news. I said, Manish, I don't want to hear it. They're not going to have a program because these guys are, he said, Doc, and he put this thing in my hand, and it was a piece of notebook paper. And I saw this letter, and it said, Dear Warden, W-O-R-D-O-N. There wasn't a spelled word correctly in it, but they had said, this is the first time we've ever worked in the prison where we felt like we were making a difference with the inmates. Please don't move us. We don't want to go. And every guard on that wing signed his name. And I said, so? It's not going to help. And he said, Doc, this has never happened before. I guarantee you, if the warden doesn't do it, we can write a letter to the head of the prison or pick up the letter and take it to that guy, whoever he is, and it'll work. And so I don't know whether he said that out loud. I don't know how he got it worked out, but when I came back, they were all just, this is a wonderful program. I sure wish I'd been picked for it, kind of thing. And those men worked so hard. The complaints had been that the men were throwing feces and hot urine on the guards when they went up and down the rows. And so that the guards were walking with these body shields. They weren't even looking, they weren't even checking the cells, because if they had come in the door, the inmates could have hit them with the feces or the urine. They were throwing it through the bars. And I set up a program where if they did this, and this, cleaning their cells. There isn't much to do in a prison. You just sit there. So I had them cleaning the cells and getting some Windex and wiping down the beds and everything. And I had a little chart outside, and each time I told the guards, they're not going to throw anything on you. And the guard had to sign, yes, they had done this. And one of the guards who hated me and hated everybody, well, hated me, I don't blame him, he came up to me and he said, see that man in that cell right there? You know what I saw him doing? And I said, no, what? He said, he was reaching outside the prison bar, outside the bars with a pencil and checking off those. And I said, oh, glory be to Jesus. We got him. You know, that we had him. After that, I said, don't you understand? He wanted to earn the cup of coffee. I gave him a teaspoonful of coffee because there's certain things you can't give them, mostly nice things, like candy or fruit. No, yet. So I was able to give each man who filled in, and then of course the guards had to check the cells. They were walking into the cells and checking all the things the men had done. It was beautiful. It was just wonderful. It was beautiful, and it worked.
It's awesome.
And I also, one more thing, during the 9 months, or from August till December, whatever it was that I was there, they never had any entertainment. And I said, could we not give these men some entertainment? He said, oh, we can get a movie. So I said, okay. So they had a cell that was a little bit bigger than this, and that's where they put half of F-Wing in. And I said, let's put all of them in. And he said, you can't do that, Janet. If they start fighting, I'll lose my job. I said, no, I'll tell them I did it. Don't worry. I think with a movie, not one of these cartoony things. And so he said, okay, we'll try it. I'll try it. So I said, I'm coming in with you. And so I came in and I stood at the very back at the door with my back to the door. I couldn't have gotten out, but I could have turned around while they threw things at me. And we had popcorn. He said, we cannot let anyone know. I said, all I want to do is see if it works. Well, it did. And we had movies after that. And then one of the wardens, assistant wardens, who later was arrested for stealing from the prison, turned us in because we had popcorn. Now they were popcorn balls, because I was afraid if anyone found popcorns on the cells on the cell floor that it would be out, But so we were very careful. Everybody, the prisoners helped me sweep out the cells so nobody would know that they were eating popcorn and watching movies. And those men worked so hard. And then we started a school. Each inmate on F-Wing, once a week, got to go for an hour into an empty cell with a television set and sit there for an hour and watch television. And in the other parts of the prison where the men weren't considered so dangerous, they would have one room with a big screen, and all the inmates from but F-Wing, they wouldn't let them out. And during the time, right after the program started, before we put all the stuff in, one of our inmates committed suicide. He hanged himself. And that just broke my heart. And I heard one of the guards say, well, that's one less we have to put up with. I was just sick. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting calls every day calling the case managers what we needed to do. And that we only lost one man. And all of these inmates were single cell because they were considered so dangerous that they couldn't put two of them together in a cell. And so each man got to come out if he wanted to, if he had earned his points, and I took pictures that they could send home. And all of them started somewhere on the wing. They all started taking their coffee and the coffee grounds that they got out of there, whatever, and it was the coffee they earned, and they were putting it in the water. They were taking water out of the sink and pushing it into a pan or something, probably a urinal, and then they dyed their uniforms at TDC, at Texas Department of Criminal Justice. They're all white, and they dyed those. They dip dyed their tops in this coffee or whatever it was. They came out brown. so they could send the pictures home and their parents could show their friends because it didn't look like a prison uniform. And the warden cut that off. And I told the men, I said, you know, I don't know what to say, everything we've tried. And they said, don't you worry, little miss, we'll be okay. And there wasn't any more trouble. But the prison, I guess that broke my heart, the prison that was having so much trouble, our wing was perfect. I don't know about perfect. We never had anyone killed. We never had anyone hurt. We never had any of the guards attacked. We never had, when the guards used to go in with shields, and they stopped going in with shields. They could go in like you and I would go in to make sure that the cells, that there was no contraband hidden anywhere. I mean, it was like a regular city prison where there, you know, where people weren't considered so dangerous, just drunks and, you know, and molesters and drug addicts or something. I don't know. But my men were clean. And I was there until, can we tell them a story about when they tried to fire us?
Sure, you can tell them anything you want to.
Well, no, you were there. Sigrid got a call from the prison. You can tell that part
No,
of it.
you tell them.
Saying that we had to leave, that they didn't need us anymore, and that I made trouble. I can't remember what it was, but it was the prison psychiatrist. And he called and said, or he had reported to the head of the prison, we got to get rid of her, she's making trouble, it's not good, and we got to get her out. And so I was going, and he wanted to see me when he fired me. And so I was going down, and you can take it from there,
No,
because
you
it was
can tell.
beautiful. No, it was beautiful.
I don't even remember it.
You don't remember it.
I do
She
think
said,
it, but you remember better.
she said, doctor, we each called each other doctor because no one ever called us doctor. She said, doctor, we're going to go down there and we're going to resign. I said, Sigrid, she said, we're going to resign, trust me, it won't happen. So you're not going to.
They weren't going to fire you, I remember now.
Yes,
No, they weren't going to fire you. They were going to read the riot act and tell you, you know, that you had to do this and you couldn't do that and all this stuff. And so that's the reason, strategically, I said, just tell them you're going to leave.
Okay, right.
And then that would basically bring them around to altering their
And this
activity.
guy was a delightful homosexual. Very, very gay. The prison, and they hated gay people in prison. And their prison psychologists remember he was which is fine. He was a twit. I don't know what other word to say. Which is fine. Who cares? But they did. And so when we came in, Sigrid said, the minute they say you're through or whatever, just we're going to get up and walk out. We didn't say, oh, please. So he said, you know, we can't keep make these exceptions for this wing. And he was lecturing on and on. And then there's this man sitting next to him with hair this color that must have been twice as tall as you, with a big black beard. You remember Ferraro?
Ferraro, that was his name.
Oh, and he was the new prison psychologist. Quijano went into private practice. Anyway, so he had a beard, and it was curly, and it was down to here, and he had hair, and he must have been. He made you look shrimpish. Let me tell you, he was huge, and he came over, and there was a table, and Sigrid and I were sitting over here, and the prison psychiatrist was here, and Dr. Ferraro was over there, and there was about a table's width apart, and he started talking about how they didn't like what I had done, whatever, just one thing after another. And then Ferraro got up, and you know, looking at him like this, and his face, he said, "You're not going to stay. We can't have you." And he's pounding the table, and that beard, and you know, it was like, and Sigrid had said to me, you know, just keep your cool. And so, you know.
Thank you very much, we said.
Yes.
Goodbye.
And the guy at the prison, what was his name? I can't remember, the psychiatrist. When Sigrid was sitting here, I was sitting there, and she stood up and said, "Thank you very," whatever. Tell him what you said. You tell him.
I think that was it. It was, well, thank you very much. We'll be going.
And she said, "Come on, doctor." And as I was standing up out of my chair, this guy leaped around the table, came over, but he didn't come over. He just leaped up and said, "Wait, let's talk about this. Let's talk about it." And of course, Ferraro had threatened and was just a real bad person. It was a really nasty presentation. And Ferraro got up like this, and the prison psychiatrist just put his hand out and shoved him in his seat. and then Ferraro shut up, and you tell him the rest. I don't remember that. I was just my heart was pounding so hard.
Yeah.
I could see all that money going out the window. And what was I going to do? Because there wasn't a lot of money for me
It was
here.
a typical case of bullies.
Oh, yeah.
Bullies threatening, and all you have to do is call their bluff and they usually back off. Sometimes.
I didn't-
They don't always back off.
Well, they had called the university. Remember, they called the university, who called you, because this guy said she's not suitable for prison work or whatever. And so that's when you said we'll go down there, because he called the president of the university, who fortunately knew me. Well, I couldn't run faster than he did, but I tried. We were out walking in the morning every morning, and so we started. And Ferraro. Now wait a minute, and then he backed all the way off, and I couldn't believe it. I never would have had the guts if Sigrid hadn't been there to do that. I would have said, made a cute statement beginning with an F, and then walked out. I mean, I was not going to be insulted because our men had done so well, and Sigrid saved the day. I mean, it was her idea. In fact, she said, "I'll go down with you." I was supposed to go down, and she came with me. And
That's going to drag her out if I had to.
but I'm going to tell you, we were driving back to Dallas, and we were laughing so hard we had to stop the car 4 or 5 times on the side of the road. Do you remember when he did it? There were tears running down our face. We were laughing. So I never had any more trouble after that. And Andrew Ferraro stayed as the prison psychologist, but he never gave me any problem. Let me tell you one thing about how I got hired. I forgot about this. I kept sending Quijano letters, and I got down to Quijano finally called Sigrid and said, "Okay, I'm going to hire her." And she called me. I was in Houston on a consulting job, as an outplacement consultant, and Sigrid called and said, "Doctor, said, Doctor, we're in." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, You're going to be going to the prison." Quijano called and said he would put you on the payroll and send the money from my salary from the prison to North Texas, so she would have we'd have a payroll. I mean, she would have someone working in the department.
So you would be an employee of the university?
Yeah. Okay. Details. So where was I?
Which means you would get insurance.
Oh yeah,
Stuff like that.
still do get. Oh, where
So
was I?
finally, you got the call and you were going to go talk to Dr. Keon.
Oh yeah, yes. Well, I wasn't going to go as a full-time. He hired me as a full-time employee, which I was, but I really wasn't because I was working in North Texas, and I didn't want to work in the prison. I wasn't going to give up. I didn't have much of a job here, but I wanted what I had. I wasn't going to give up for the prison, and so all the way down. I sat and thought about it. I think I showed you. Did I show you what I'd written up about what I could do?
Probably. Yeah, I'm sure.
And it was clearly a consulting job. I didn't ever say consultant, but I told him about all the things I would do for the prison. But it was clearly not a full-time job, and so I didn't ever put on there part-time or whatever. So. He called me and said, I called him, I said, "I can come down on whatever day it was." He said, "Okay." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll take you to lunch." And I said, "Oh, girl couldn't pass up something that nice." And I said, "I'll be there." So my husband drove me down, and I said, "Ed, honey, I'd love to go to lunch with you, but Dr. Quijano's taking me to lunch." He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll find something to eat." So he dropped me off at the prison, and I come in. There's a woman sitting behind a desk, and I said, I'm Dr. Ellis. I'm here to see Dr. Quijano." And she said, "Well, he's at lunch." I said, "No, he's not. He's taking me to lunch." And she said, "Yes, he is. He's at lunch." And I mean, I could feel my face getting red. My husband was out there stumbling around looking for food, and I could have eaten with him and then come in. And I had also tucked away a little piece of paper in my purse that described what I planned to do, which was definitely consulting. And so two men walked in. I waited. I came early so that I'd be early. We were going to go to lunch at 12. I came at 11:30, and he wasn't there because he was out to lunch. 12:30, he wasn't there. And about 20 minutes of one, two men walk in. One's about as tall as you, and one's about this short. And I'm sitting in the chair. My stomach is grumbling. I'm so angry. I mean, I was really angry. I the hell with this, you know. And he walked in, and I walked over to the two men, and I said, "Dr. Quijano, I have been," and this little fella spoke up and said, "I'm Dr. Quijano," about that tall, wasn't he about that tall? And I said, "You're Dr. Quijano? Well, let me tell," and I was so mad, I was shaking, I was hungry, my stomach was grumbling, and I've been waiting since 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was 1. And I mean, that was, you know, he promised to take me to lunch. And he said to the fellow, he said, "Just a minute," he said, and he said, I'll get someone, Dr. Ellis, to talk to you, and I'll talk." And I said, "Oh, no, you won't. No, you won't. I've been waiting 2 hours. I haven't had any lunch." I said, "You'll see me, and he can see the other person." And so Quijano said, "All right." And I was so mad. He said, "All right." And then we got to his office, and I told him the plans that I had for the prison. And he said, "We don't have to say any more. We can talk about the rest of this while we're walking over to personnel." And I said, my motto has always been, when in doubt, whip it on out. And I whipped out the proposal that had nothing. I mean, it was what my terms were, which was to work so many days a week, 3 days a week, full time, from 8 in the morning until the last shift at night, 10 o'clock at night, and then come home on Friday. I was there work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And he said, "Well, this is a consulting psychologist position. This isn't a full-time job." And I said, "That's right." And he said, "But you said," I said, "Oh no, you said. I never said that I was coming full-time. I've got a husband and 2 kids at home, and there's no way I'm going to leave them." And he said, "But," I said, "I'll be here. They can contact me anytime. Believe me, it'll work." And Quijano said, "All right." And he's got laughing. He said, "You put one over on me." I said, "I didn't put one over on you. I told you when I called you I was a psychologist. I didn't tell you I was coming to work in the prison. I told you what I could do for the prison if you hired me. But I didn't tell you I'd come to work for you." So that's what happened. I got the job, and the other man walked to personnel. I guess I didn't go. I left and met my husband, and we went home. But Quijano liked so much what we were doing.
He was something of a behaviorist himself.
Yeah,
He was trained out in Hawaii.
And Sigrid
by
had
Arthur
this
Stotts.
brilliant idea. She said, "Let's invite him." We had just founded, well, 8 of us or however many, talked about starting Texaba. So Sigrid said, "Let's ask Walter," remember, "to be our invited speaker."
That was later, but yeah, we did do that eventually.
And he was so honored because he really was, but he was a closet behaviorist. You couldn't be a behaviorist.
Oh, he claimed to be a behaviorist.
Well, no, but in prison he didn't. He was a psychologist, and that's what he didn't talk about behavior analysis. And he was so thrilled with the results we had. We were the first in the entire Texas in the entire TDC system to be taken off of court supervision. I asked the inmates, I said, "Look, guys, I'm just curious. What do they ask you?" I mean, because I knew the court, Judge William Wayne Justice was sending once a week a court-appointed administrator to question inmates. Well, he couldn't have gotten near them when they were throwing feces and urine. He had to wait till we got rid of all that. And so I found out from one of the guards there was always a guard with anybody from the outside of the prison, outside prison system who came in. And so the guard would accompany the administrator, and then the administrator would say, you know, and the guard backed off where he couldn't hear, and the administrator asked the inmate certain questions. Every one of those guys, every one of them that were in our, now you didn't have to be in our program, and at first there were only 8, then there were, what did we have, 38 or 40. The administrator would ask them, you know, how do you feel about this? And those guys, I started crying when I heard what they said. They said it was the first time in their lives that anyone had ever taught them to read and to write, and they didn't want to leave until they were fully educated. I mean, that took, you know, for inmates that were single cell because they were considered so dangerous, that was a compliment. And they really meant it. And that was the story.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to switch to you for a minute, Sigrid. So what were some of the obstacles that you encountered in trying to establish the Department of Behavior Analysis?
Wow.
Where did she start?
Yeah, where do we start? First of all, the psychology department, for the most part, did not want us to have a program in behavior analysis. And they objected at several levels of the university.
Talk to the dean, remember?
Go ahead and say it out loud.
Yeah, you can.
One of them came over to talk to Dean Luker. Remember to talk to Dean Luker about that he shouldn't do it?
No. Is that Bert Hextrup?
Yes.
No, there's a lot of back and forth in the university, but some of the obstacles were that the coordinating board has to approve of curricula. You have to go through multiple committees in the university before you can get a curriculum. The psych department was opposed to it, and they had people on all the committees that, you know, would have to approve. The vice president had to approve, and then the coordinating board had to approve. And so we had a number of hoops we had to go through, but eventually we did get through them multiple times, and each time something would happen and the program would be disbanded, or the idea would be disbanded, the proposal would be rejected or whatever. But eventually we did get a proposal through, and we were supposed to start the master's degree program in the fall or the following fall, but we had some courses to offer in '83. The program was supposed to start in '84, the master's degree program, and if it passed the coordinating board. And Don Whaley started teaching the undergraduate courses, which were to service the master's degree program, and he was 2 months into the semester and he died. So the university pulled the master's degree program from the coordinating board and said, never mind, we won't ask for that. So we were back to square one.
So what did you do? Come on. What did
Ask another question.
Well, how about what did you do? I like that question. So what did you do then?
Okay.
They thought, Sigrid came up with the idea that letters would help. Yeah, that was your idea.
I don't know. We had multiple times gotten letters
over the
written
year.
for many times, but I don't know who came up with the idea. But I do know that Janet contacted a whole lot of people and got people to write in. There's so many times that we went to so many different people and we did different things each time. It's very hard to describe it in any brief way. But the bottom line is that we multiple times went through the process of getting something approved by the university, and then it was not accepted or whatever. The time it finally did get accepted was the time Janet was talking about, when we had a whole lot of people write letters to support it, and we were very fortunate to have Jack Haynes, who was the chair of the psychology department, there to be consulted, and he was a good man, and he basically said, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't do this. And so with the psych department not basically saying no, if they had said no, we would not have got it. But they said okay. This was after Don died. This was several years later when we were trying again to get a master's degree. But by that time we already had courses in place and a number of other things going on. So we already had something going, and Janet was teaching, I was teaching. We had Cloyd Heighton, who was teaching as a result of a contract that I had with the Denton State School to teach people there behavior analysis. So there was a whole lot of things that were coming from different directions at the same time. It was sort of like we would move in this direction. Janet was working doing the prison. Janet also was instrumental in helping us get an American Express grant. She had a friend who worked for American Express. He was not real high, but he was like a vice president of something. She made contact with him, and he put us in contact with the Amex Foundation. And we ended up writing a proposal. I, and Dean Luker, Bill Luker, we submitted a proposal, and we got a grant from them. So we had, then we got this rather large grant from the Denton State School, where I was working as consulting chief psychologist.
By the way, on there, she went in every morning at 5 o'clock and stayed until noon every day. And then
just until 10.
Well, okay, 5 hours every
Okay,
morning,
yeah,
and then
early.
taught a full day, and sometimes had
No,
night
we
classes.
usually taught at night. We didn't teach in the day.
And
So anyway, we just kept moving from different angles and trying to put it together and make it happen.
she put it together, and I helped her make it happen. She put it all together. It was in her head. Nobody thought that it would work out.
That's quite true. Nobody thought it would work out. When we told colleagues in behavior analysis about it, we said we're trying to start a program in behavior analysis, and they said, no, you can't have students in behavior analysis. They won't get jobs. They have to be in education or psychology or social work, whatever. I said, well, we're going to start a program in behavior analysis because we think they can get jobs, because we think people need behavior analysts. And they did.
Sigrid worked many hours.
We all worked many hours. So we did.
What happened was, after Cloyd Heighton came and Joel Greenspoon and myself, we went out to the state school. Remember, we went out and taught.
Actually, the students came to us. We taught on campus, and they released their students from work, and they came to us, and we had 3 courses that you and I and Joel developed.
Okay.
And actually, they had a lot of the components that our distant course now has in it. They had some PSI elements. They had some videotapes, and we had some computer instruction where they do things on the computer. So we that was in 1988 and 89. So we were, I think, way ahead of the curve on that. So.
And Sigrid was the person who had the contacts at the Denton State School, and in order for us to, I think I wasn't in the prison anymore by then.
Contacts to do what?
To work, to teach out there, because that way you generated a salary for Joel. Yes, you did.
We didn't teach out there. We taught on the campus. We taught their students.
Oh,
on
okay.
campus.
Well, I taught out there a couple of courses.
Yeah, what you did was a practicum out there.
Okay,
We had a practicum
okay.
for our students,
Okay.
our master's degree students. We had a practicum out there.
Okay,
And,
and okay.
and you taught them out there. And there may have been some workshops. I don't remember.
Yeah, we did a couple of
but
workshops.
we had their whole staff come and take 3 courses.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so this question can go for either or both of you. Once it was established, what were the initial goals of the department?
The initial goals of the department?
Mm-hmm.
Once what was established?
Once behavior analysis was established as a department, as a program.
Well, it wasn't really established as the department. We were the Center for Behavioral Studies, and we were a unit in the School of Community Service. And the units were either institutes or centers. We were the Center for Behavioral Studies. When we started getting courses in behavior analysis, which were first called ABAN, Applied Behavior Analysis, the undergraduate courses were called ABAN. We started with undergraduate courses. When we first started teaching the undergraduate courses,
Sigrid had a private practice, and I had a private practice. We worked at night to generate funds for ourselves. Remember that, Sigrid?
Yeah, that was earlier. That was earlier though. It's such a long story, Rachel. I mean, it's so long and it has so many pieces to it that we would be here all day for me to tell you that story.
So then let me jump a little bit
Okay,
ahead.
all right.
When was the department founded?
Well, as I was saying, the Center for Behavioral Studies became the Center for Behavior Analysis when we got courses in behavior analysis. We were the Center for Behavior Analysis even after we got our master's degree program. So we
Okay.
were the Center for Behavioral Analysis with a master's degree program. And then we got a new dean, it was Dan Johnson. And I was what was called the unit director all the different, what are now departments in the college were these institutes and centers, and they had unit directors, and we all started pushing on the dean to make us all departments. And so eventually he worked it out with the coordinating board that all of us would be departments. And so we probably never would have been a department if other units hadn't also been institutes, but it gave us a sort of cover, you know.
A member of a broad class.
To do that.
So once it was a department, what were your goals for students?
When we first started, we don't really make a clear. When it was a department is less important to us than the fact that we had a curriculum in behavior analysis that was only behavior analysis, and other people couldn't tell us what was going to be in our curriculum. We decided what was going to be in the curriculum. So the initial goals were to prepare people to do work in behavior analysis or to go on to a PhD program, whichever they were interested in. At that time, we didn't have a large number of practical opportunities as we do now. Janet's work in the prison we had some instructional technology activities that some of our students, like Leslie Burkett was one of our students at that time, and she was interested in instructional technology. We had a study hall for the athletic department, their athletes, and Guy Bruce was, Dean Luker asked me to start that, and I started it, but I got Guy Bruce to help me, and then later other people helped, and so we had a number of applied areas where people could work, but nothing like it is today, where you have labs with people, you know. It developed over time, and then as we got more people, we got more labs. And the first experimental lab we had was when Manish was the graduate student, and Andrea Poyster was here, a student of Carol Pilgrim from Wilmington, UNC Wilmington. And Annie was very interested in stimulus equivalents, and that's Carol Pilgrim and Mark Galizio did a lot of research in that area. And Annie was interested in doing some research in that area, and Manish got interested in it. And so he and Manish and Carol and I, Manish and Annie and I started the Stimulus Equivalence Lab, which we did for several years, quite a few years, maybe about 6 or 7. So that was the first experimental lab we had. We also had another lab that came about as a result of Francis Mechner, who was very interested in getting back into the lab, and he had left the lab umpty-ump years ago and wanted to get back into experimental work but didn't really have a university or anything. So I invited Francis to come down, stay at our home, and work with people in the department to do some basic research in what he called the revealed operant. And he worked with Cloyd and Doug Field and Greg Madden and I think Manish. Not 100% sure Manish was involved in that. And they developed this preparation for studying the revealed operant, eventually published in that area. Joel was working in that, I think, with that. And that was still when the only faculty were Cloyd and Janet and me, and part-time Joel. And the 3 of us were full-time. But even then, Janet and Cloyd weren't on a tenure track. It took a number of years before we could get that arranged with the university. So it was a long process of piece by piece and step by step, you know, making this piece happen and then making that piece happen and then making this piece happen.
Let me tell you, Sigrid is very modest and always has been. I want to tell you something. When we saw that there was a hope of getting a department, we didn't have any income. I mean, they weren't paying us anything. They were paying Sigrid, and so they were paying you. They weren't paying me, I don't think.
When are you
When I was
thinking of?
I was talking about the time before